Hey guys, tonight we're going to slide back in time, just past the curtain of the Edo period, where paper walls tremble in the wind, sandals slap wet stones, and the rules of life are so tightly folded they even tell you which way to point your head when you sleep. You're a wandering ronin, sword at your side, coin purse embarrassingly light, and dusk already swallowing the sky. Rain pelts the countryside like thrown rice. Each drop strikes with intention, soaking your clothes, dulling your senses. There's no sign of another traveler, just you, the misty road, and the silhouette of an inn flickering with lantern light in the distance, its roof sagging slightly, like it's tired of holding secrets. The old wooden inn creaks as you slide open the door. You're greeted by warm miso steam and a host who doesn't so much bow as fold in half. "One night?" he asks without looking up. You nod, breathless, water pooling around your feet. He leads you down a narrow corridor where shadows gather like gossip. The room is small, cozy, tatami mats smell of straw and smoke. He gestures to the futon already laid out. "Do not face north," he mumbles as he closes the door behind him. Now, you could ignore him. You've slept with your head north before, right? Maybe, can't remember. But something about the way he said it, like he wasn't warning you so much as warning the room, sticks. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, comment below where you're watching from and what time it is. I love seeing who's out there sharing these quiet nights with me. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You sit, rub your palms together, and take in the space. There's a faint scent of sandalwood. A single candle burns low in the corner. The futon is perfectly placed, facing north. The Japanese call it kita makura, north pillow. And if you were lying dead, that's exactly how they'd position you. Head to the north, feet to the south. You wouldn't need to worry about demons or dreams anymore. You'd be an ex-samurai, a former swordsman, a ghost in training. But you're very much alive and suddenly wide awake. You roll the idea around in your head. Why north? Why does a pillow direction matter in a country known for stoic warriors and practical steel? Turns out, practicality can wear strange masks. Historically, sleeping with your head facing north in Japan is associated with death, because that's the direction corpses are traditionally laid out during funeral rites. In Buddhist tradition, the Buddha passed away lying on his right side, head to the north. So, to imitate that pose while still living, let's just say it wasn't seen as respectful, more like presumptuous or inviting. And the samurai? They didn't joke about such things. Even the fiercest warrior might twitch at the thought of sleeping north, just as he might flinch at drawing his blade indoors. It wasn't fear, it was form, ritual, quiet reverence for things unseen. You lie on your side, eyes on the paper door. Your sword rests within reach, just as you were taught. Never sleep without it nearby. But the way the futon points, directly toward the head of the room, it unsettles you. The candle guttered low is casting strange shadows. You wonder how many guests have come through here and simply disappeared. Of course, there's the practical explanation: cold winds. In traditional Japanese homes, especially in rural regions, the north side tends to be colder, not ideal for sleeping. But the taboo goes deeper, more emotional, more spiritual. Historians still argue whether the association with death stems primarily from Buddhist doctrine or older animist beliefs from Shinto practices. After all, the north has long been considered the direction of the other world in multiple Asian cultures. Not evil necessarily, but liminal, a threshold, a place where the rules of the living bend and blur. You hear a floorboard creak, not from your room, somewhere down the hall. It's late, very late. You draw the blanket higher over your chest, trying not to imagine the innkeeper's words. Do not face north. Maybe he just meant don't die tonight. Maybe the superstition is like hanging mirrors to scare off spirits or clapping at shrines to get the gods' attention. More symbolic than serious. And yet, the wind outside shifts. A sudden draft tugs the candle's flame sideways. It flickers, stretches thin, and dies with a whisper. Darkness. A lesser warrior would move the futon, but you stay where you are. Part curiosity. You don't move. Not yet. Your breath is shallow, barely stirring the thin blanket pulled tight under your chin. Whatever made that sound, maybe it's just the wind, maybe it's the innkeeper doing rounds. But the sound of a sliding door carries a kind of tension, doesn't it? That long, slow scrape of wood on wood, it always feels like it's letting something in. You remember the futon's orientation again. Still north, still wrong. But before we go chasing shadows down the hallway, let's talk about why that direction holds so much weight. Why was it that a culture famed for its logic, discipline, and martial precision told its most hardened warriors, just don't sleep that way? Well, the phrase kita makura isn't just a custom, it's a loaded signal. Sleeping with your head toward the north, in many parts of Japan, is like lying in a coffin-shaped outline in a thunderstorm. It's not illegal, obviously, but it quietly suggests you're ready to let go, to pass on. It's a social signal the way wearing all black might be in some Western funerals, except in reverse. You're the one in the ritual, and you're still breathing. The tradition hails in part from Buddhist funerary practice. When someone passes away, their body is aligned with the Buddha's own death posture, head to the north, facing west. The west is where the Pure Land lies in Mahayana belief. It's peaceful, beautiful, enlightenment adjacent, not a bad neighborhood to die in. But sleep? That's where things get complicated. Because in Japan, sleep isn't just rest, it's something liminal. The line between dream and death has always been suspiciously thin. Folktales abound of people falling asleep and waking years later in other realms, or never waking at all. And the samurai? They knew better than most that a nap could be a trap. You shift in the dark. The room feels colder. It's not just your nerves. Edo-era architecture wasn't big on insulation. Many homes were built with an awareness of cardinal directions. Rooms meant for sleeping were often positioned away from the north to avoid harsh drafts during winter. Function met superstition in a perfect storm of, let's not do that. The placement of the head when sleeping was one of many small, quiet codes a samurai followed. You didn't shout about these things, you just knew. Like not stepping over a sword or always drinking from the left side of a shared cup. Habits that meant nothing to outsiders, but everything to those raised in the code. And here's the twist. Some warriors went even further. You remember being told as a boy, if you ever saw a futon placed head to north in a home with no sign of mourning, you were to leave, no questions. That family was either deeply troubled or deeply cursed. Of course, scholars debate how widely these customs were followed. Some argue that the Kita-makura taboo was more regional than national, stronger in Kansai than Kanto, for instance. Others believe its origins may lie even earlier, in prehistoric Jomon burial rites. The evidence? Sparse, but suggestive. Human remains facing north, with tools and charms buried beside them. You try not to think about your own tools, your katana specifically, resting just out of reach. That creak comes again, this time unmistakable. And that's when the logical part of your brain kicks in, the part that survived ambushes and battlefield fevers. You remember that superstition serves two masters, fear and function. North-facing rooms in old inns were often closer to the mountains, where wolves and spirits were said to roam. The belief wasn't just about ghosts, it was also about geography, wind patterns, security. Sound travels differently when you're facing the wrong way. The candle, still dead, has left the room soaked in ink. You reach for your sword by habit, fingers brushing the tsuka. Comforting, cold, familiar. A memory rises. You once met a retired guard who refused to sleep with his head north, even after his legs had given up.
It's the direction where things come from, he said, not the good kind, things you can't stab. At the time, you laughed. Now, not so funny. Your hand tightens around the sword. You stay flat on your back, just like a corpse, staring into the void where the ceiling should be. You listen. Nothing. Silence can be worse than sound. Then, a voice, so faint it could be a trick of your own breath. Wrong way. Just 2 words, delivered like a joke, or a warning. You bolt upright. The futon rustles beneath you. The floor doesn't creak, but your heart certainly does. Stillness returns, but it wears new clothes, heavier ones, like it knows you heard something that wasn't meant for the living. You shuffle to the futon's edge. Do you rotate it? Face east instead? West? South? There are rules for those directions.
You awaken before dawn, that murky hour when the world hasn't quite decided if it's alive or not. The air is colder now, but it's not the kind of cold that creeps. This is the still cold of untouched snow, of quiet temples and morning incense. And for a moment, you don't remember why you're clutching your sword like a teddy bear. Then the futon creaks beneath you. Ah, right. You blink slowly, trying to piece the night together. Did you actually hear a voice? Was the futon really facing north, or had you imagined that too? You sit up, bones clicking gently, and notice something new. The candle, which had burned out hours ago, is now upright and unlit. Not melted, not warped, just placed. Like someone had pressed rewind on reality and forgotten to hit play again. The floor beneath you is dry, your sword still unsheathed in your hand. But the tatami mat? A single black thread has been pulled loose, curving away from the futon, pointing north like a stitched compass. Your stomach growls. Ghosts or not, you're still mortal. After dressing, you step out into the corridor. The inn is silent. The other rooms shut tight. You pass an open alcove holding a vase of plum blossoms, half wilted and oddly beautiful. There's something almost too perfect about their placement, a still life designed for the dead. At breakfast, the innkeeper doesn't mention your room, doesn't ask how you slept, just places the bowl of rice and miso in front of you like a man fulfilling a contract. So, you ask softly, why north? He doesn't look up. We align the dead that way. That's enough reason. But it isn't, is it? Not for someone like you. Someone who's killed, been hunted, left behind temples burning in the rear view of history. You need more than symbolism. You need an explanation with edges. You've heard the rumors of how Buddhist funerary rites adopted the Kita-Makura practice to mirror the way the historical Buddha passed into parinirvana, final enlightenment, beyond rebirth. The body was said to be placed on its right side, head to the north, face west. To sleep like that, as a living person, was to flirt with fate, like dressing for your own funeral and then trying to catch a train. There's also the physicality of death. Japanese households often held funerals in the same room where bodies were laid out, on futons no less. So, if your pillow was north-facing, the unspoken assumption was, someone has died here, or someone will. You sip the miso carefully. It's salty, grounding. You need that. Historians still argue whether this directional taboo was enforced among all classes or if it was primarily a warrior's concern. After all, who had more reason to fear death in their sleep than someone trained to die standing? Samurai were expected to sleep lightly, blade nearby, mind half awake. Uchikomi drills taught you that. Swordplay wasn't just physical, it bled into your posture, your rest, your dreams. And dreams? Oh, those were serious business. Many samurai followed esoteric forms of Zen, where dreams were interpreted not as distractions, but as whispers from a deeper layer of reality. The position of the head during sleep was believed to shape the type of dreams that visited you. North-facing heads, so the belief went, invited uninvited guests. Spirits, ancestors, enemies. Some called it communion, others called it asking for trouble. You leave the inn by late morning, sandals crunching gravel. The sun finally crawls over the hills. You feel different, not changed exactly, just observed. By midday, you arrive at a village temple, one of those half-forgotten ones, overgrown with moss, where the priests are old and the statues older. The head monk greets you with a nod, like he was expecting someone. Not you, maybe, but someone. His robes are thick, the color of old parchment. His eyes sharper than most blades you faced. You slept at the Nagasaka Inn, he says, without a question mark. You nod. And, in the north room? Again, you nod. He sighs, as if your answer just confirmed a long-held suspicion. It is the way of death, he says, but not only for the body. You ask what he means, and he leads you through the side gardens where Jizo statues dot the moss like frozen sentinels. They watch the path, not guard it, watch it, as though waiting for someone to come back. North is the forest is a cradle tonight. Cedar needles soften your steps. The breeze hums low through the trees like a lullaby meant for someone else. And the sky, dusted in stars, feels less like a ceiling and more like something watching over you. You lie beneath it, wrapped in your thin traveling cloak, head carefully pointed south. And for the first time in a while, you sleep without the sword in hand. It's a light sleep, not the dead weight of exhaustion, but something more cautious, like your spirit is peeking out from behind a curtain, one eye open. You dream of water. A still pond, surface like glass, until a single ripple blooms from the center, as if someone or something just dipped a toe in. You wake before the ripple reaches shore. No voices, no candle, just the woods. And yet, even out here, the idea of sleeping facing north feels wrong. Like you'd be sending an invitation to whatever stirs just beyond the dream. You sit up, rubbing your neck. You've started to notice how often temples, shrines, and even roadside statues in rural Japan are oriented away from the north. Not just because of wind or weather, but because of belief. Direction in traditional Japanese cosmology was never just practical, it was spiritual topography. The four guardian beasts of ancient Onmyodo, Japan's yin-yang infused geometric system, mark the cardinal points. You might remember this from your early studies, or perhaps from the lacquered scrolls in your father's chest. East, the azure dragon of spring, renewal. South, the vermilion bird, symbol of summer and fire. West, the white tiger, a figure of autumn and grief. And north, the black tortoise, of winter, of death. Samurai weren't mystics by trade, but they were never fools either. They respected what had power, be it sword or symbol. Even battlefield tents were sometimes arranged to avoid sleeping head to north. Officers would rotate their positions, blaming it on terrain or convenience, but everyone knew it was superstition in armor. You pack up your bedding and set off down the road. Another village waits, one you haven't visited in years. The path is narrow, lined with bamboo and rumors. They say the shrine there, Kurasato Jinja, holds a kamidana, a household altar, older than the village itself. A place where warriors once made offerings before war. You arrive near dusk. The village is modest, nestled in a valley like it's hiding from the sky. The innkeeper here is younger, more curious than afraid. You rent a room without mentioning your direction preferences, then ask if Kurasato Jinja still has its altar. He blinks. It's still there, but most don't go, not after dark. You smile. That's when the gods are listening. And that night, you walk to the shrine alone.
It's barely more than a stone platform with a tattered roof, but the kamidana is intact. Wood darkened by smoke and weather, paper charms still fluttering in the wind. You bow, not out of fear, but habit, respect. The altar has a compass carved into its surface, subtle and worn. The north point? Marked with a faint red scratch. Not decorative, not accidental. A warning. You wonder how many others noticed it, or listened. Historians still argue whether Onmyodo had much influence on the day-to-day of common samurai life. Some say it was mostly courtly, used by nobles and priests to justify power. Others insist its roots ran deep, guiding farmers, monks, even warriors in how they laid out their homes, buried their dead, and faced their dreams. You don't need a scholar to tell you what your gut already knows. Direction matters. You return to the inn well past midnight. The room is quiet, candle lit. You check the futon. Head facing north. Of course. You pause. You could flip it. You should flip it. But a thought roots itself in your chest, thick and stubborn. What if the room wants it this way? You stare at the futon for too long, then kneel beside it like it's a puzzle. Slowly, you pivot the mattress, turn it until your pillow faces east. The candle flickers. Not jokingly, not by accident. It flickers once, then goes out. You're beginning to hate candles. Still, you lie down, blade nearby. Sleep hesitates, circles you. You leave the village at first light, shoulders stiff, nerves taut like the string of a half-drawn bow. It's not fear exactly. Fear has a sharper taste. This is awareness. That sense of something brushing against your periphery, never quite entering the room, but always just outside it. You're beginning to understand what old warriors meant when they said the air gets thin around certain places. This stretch of road curves eastward toward a mountain pass known in local legend as the Sleeping Gate. The name has nothing to do with rest and everything to do with the number of travelers who were said to have dozed off forever in its shadow. You once scoffed at stories like that. Now, you pack them away in the same drawer as ghosts, gods, and flickering candles. There's a temple on the ridge above the pass, Horyuzan. Half Zen monastery, half hermitage. You've been there before. The abbot keeps more cats than disciples, and the roof tiles are older than most cities. You hope he's still alive. As you climb, each footfall is muffled by the pine needle carpet. The trees here are older than they should be, twisted into wind-warped shapes, like they're all leaning, slightly, north. You reach the temple by midday. A low wall of cracked stone surrounds the inner courtyard. You bow at the gate as tradition demands and hear the soft mew of a cat before you even see a human. The abbot emerges from the side hall with the gait of someone who has aged peacefully. He smiles when he sees you. "Ah," he says, "still wandering, still looking for things no one wants found." You bow deeper than necessary. He gestures for you to sit. Over tea, steeped so long it tastes more like wood than leaf, you mention the inn, the voice, the thread, the pillow. His smile fades like mist in sunlight. The body sleeps, he says softly, but the self continues. When your head faces north, you align with death's current. It's the way the dead leave, not the way the living return. You ask if it's just belief, superstition? He considers. Not all rivers can be seen, but if your boat is moving, does it matter? He shows you a scroll, one kept hidden behind a screen. It's a diagram, crudely drawn, of a house interior. 4 beds, each labeled with a name. The heads of 3 are pointed east, west, and south. The 4th, north. The only one with an X marked over it. You don't ask what happened to the 4th. Instead, you notice a tiny note scribbled in the margin, something you almost miss. Soul's shadow travels north when unmoored. Historians still argue, the abbot says, echoing your thoughts, whether these beliefs stem from Indian cosmology, Chinese astrology, or native kami practice. But belief doesn't need agreement, only repetition. He refills your cup. Monks sleep facing the west, he continues, toward Amita's pure land, to dream of the Buddha. We turn our heads to what we seek. What does that say of north? You sip the tea, letting it anchor you. He tells you a story, an old one. A samurai once visited the temple during wartime, badly wounded, spirit restless. He insisted on sleeping in the north room of the guest hall, claiming he had nothing to fear. That night, the monks found him walking barefoot across the roof, eyes open but unseeing, muttering a child's lullaby. He vanished before dawn. No door was opened. No prints in the soil. Just a faint trail of blood leading north. The monks never used that room again. You feel a chill, internal this time. Still, you need to understand. You ask the abbot if anyone ever intentionally slept north to confront what lay beyond. He nods. Ascetics, dream divers, once in a great while, someone who sought visions. And did they return? His smile is unreadable. They wrote poems, but not about the north. You ask to stay the night. He agrees. Your bedding is laid out in the south-facing room of the desk quarters, walls lined with prayer scrolls and the comforting musk of incense. A cat curls near your feet. Sleep comes easier here, though your dreams are dense. You dream of standing on a frozen river, watching your reflection move before you do. And a voice says, almost kindly, "You've already been here. You just don't know which version of you left." You wake before the ice cracks. Dawn filters through the paper walls. You are still, whole. But for the first time, you wonder if that's true.
You take your leave of Horyuzan just after breakfast. Rice, pickles, and a bowl of something that tasted suspiciously like root broth and old secrets. The abbot bids you farewell with a phrase that sticks to your ribs more than the food does. The north is not a place, it is a pull. You descend the slope with that phrase echoing in your mind, and for once, the wind is at your back instead of against your face. But it doesn't feel like a blessing. It feels directional. Like it wants you to follow. You shake off the thought. By midday, you reach a small farming hamlet where the residents treat strangers the way you treat rattlesnakes. Politely, but from a distance. The houses here are low and square, their thatched roofs bowing under years of snow. You stop for water at a communal well, nodding at a group of old women gossiping over pickled plums. One of them glances up, her eyes narrow. "You're the traveler who came from the mountain temple," she says, not a question. You nod. She leans in slightly, voice a whisper wrapped in vinegar. "Then you've passed through the gate. Be careful, you'll dream heavier now." You ask what she means. She picks up a plum, presses it flat between her fingers. Things ride the wind through there, not all of them dismount. You offer a tight-lipped smile, thank her for the warning, and continue on your way. But that night, in a borrowed storage hut with a futon laid out on grain sacks, you find yourself rearranging everything so that your head points east, toward the mountains you left, not the fields ahead. You sleep lighter, like you're daring the dream to find you again. It doesn't. Instead, you wake at first light with a phrase already in your mouth. He turned north only once, and he never turned back. You don't know who said it, but you don't think it was you. Later that day, on a forested road that forks like a broken promise, you meet an old mapmaker, one of those rare wandering types who records the shape of the land but never claims to know it. He travels with a wooden measuring rod, a sketchbook, and a horse too tired to spook at ghosts. You share a fire. He sharpens his charcoal. You tell him your story. His reaction is not surprise, but memory. "You know," he says, "some of the oldest maps I've seen from the early Sengoku period marked the north side of certain villages with a faded ink warning. Not military threats, not flood risks, just a single word. Kage. Shadow?" He nods, but not the kind cast by light, the kind cast by presence.
He sketches in the dirt an ancient estate, rooms drawn from memory but with care. Then he marks the sleeping quarters. All beds head to the south or west, except one in a side room, labeled with a single character, Northern Guest. He erases it quickly. They say the generals would give that room to the ones they knew weren't coming back. You sip your tea, suddenly less warm. The mapmaker continues. In Kyoto, there's a corner of the Imperial Palace no one sleeps in. The room faces north. Its window looks over a wall older than the structure itself. It was once used for executions. The bodies were taken north, always north, because north was the direction of release. You ask if he's ever slept facing north. He nods, twice, once as a dare, once by accident. And? The first time I dreamed of my own death. The second time I didn't dream at all, but I woke up crying. Historians still debate the depth of this directional belief. Some attribute it to imported geomancy, others to native Shinto funeral practices. A few dismiss it entirely as anecdotal coincidence. But that doesn't explain the scrolls, or the room assignments, or the mapmaker's tears. You travel together for a day, then part ways at a bend in the road where the trees grow noticeably darker, as if the sun's forgotten how to reach between them. He gives you a gift before he goes, a compass, old and slightly off-center. Use it when you're unsure which way is forward, he says, and when you feel something behind you, check if it's north. That night, in another borrowed room, you pull out the compass. It spins a little, then steadies. North is behind you. You move your pillow. You don't ask why. Sleep comes eventually. And when it does, the dream is clearer than ever. You're standing at a crossroads. One path leads east, toward light and noise and comfort. One leads south, toward something warm and green and forgotten. One vanishes into fog, north. And from the fog comes a whisper, barely audible but unmistakably familiar. You've always known this turn was yours to take. You wake with your hand gripping the compass so tightly your knuckles ache. The needle is still, pointing north, always north. You make it to the city by week's end, a former castle town, now more temples than towers, its bones rebuilt a dozen times over by hands both calloused and careless. It's quiet here, in that peculiar way old cities get quiet. Less absence of noise, more presence of stillness. You arrive just before dusk, which is a mistake. Dusk in cities like this has a texture, a thickness, like time folding gently inward. The lanterns go up as if to hold the dark at arm's length, but they don't succeed. Not really. You find lodging in a merchant's house turned into an inn. It's clean, modest, and built around a central garden where crickets chirp like ticking clocks. You ask the keeper casually about room orientation, and he chuckles as if that's a quaint superstition. We stopped worrying about that when railways came through, he says. Still, when he shows you to your room, you catch your breath. The pillow is on the northern wall. You don't say anything. You just stand there for a while, feeling the slow itch of unease behind your eyes. Eventually, you thank him, wait for him to leave, then methodically rotate the bedding 90 degrees. Better not to risk it. But that night, the city has other plans. You wake at 2:13 a.m., not because of a sound, but because of a pause, like the world skipped a frame and your brain noticed. You sit up. The moon is sharp as glass through the paper window, and for just a moment, you see something impossible. Your pillow. It's back against the northern wall. You stare. You don't remember moving it. You don't think you moved it. And yet, there it is. A scholar once wrote that the most unsettling kind of horror isn't blood or violence. It's when reality casually ignores its own rules. That, he said, is when the mind begins to drift from the dock of certainty. You lie back down, this time with your head pointed west. You don't sleep. You pretend to sleep. There's a difference. Pretending is for protection. Sleep is for surrender. At dawn, you ask around, quietly, carefully. You learn that this part of town was once a burial quarter, back when cities sorted the dead by direction. Cremation wasn't always the standard. Bodies were interred beneath stone towers that no longer stand, and the only rule, strict and unwavering, was that the dead always face north. That way, they wouldn't wander. But as you press further, you start to hear another word crop up: Kubikajiri. It rings a bell, but not one you want to answer. An old folk tale rooted somewhere between warning and myth. A spirit that prowls graveyards at night, eating the heads of corpses. It always faces north when it feeds, they say, because that's where the veil is thinnest. That's where the smell comes from. You want to laugh it off, but there's an uncomfortable footnote. Kubikajiri is said to search not only for corpses, but also for its own lost head. And how does it find it? By sniffing out the direction of death, by turning north. You find an old woman who runs a shop selling lacquered combs and hairpins. She says her grandmother used to mutter in her sleep about the north wind eater. You ask what that meant. She says she doesn't know. But then she frowns. There's an old thing we were taught, she murmurs, almost to herself. If you ever smell something rotten and sweet at the same time, lie flat on your back, do not move, do not open your eyes, and above all, do not turn your head north. Why? Because if you turn toward it, she says, you're saying yes. To what? She won't answer. Historians often categorize tales like Kubikajiri as cautionary devices, myths meant to keep children from playing near tombs or wandering at night. But there are gaps. Reports from as late as the Meiji era mention people found near gravesites, heads twisted in unnatural positions, their own hands clasped tightly over their ears. The official cause? Night terrors. Unofficially, one too many said yes. That evening, you refuse the same room. They give you another, northeast-facing, smaller, mustier. You don't sleep anyway. At some point, you find yourself staring at your own hands, palms up, watching how the veins branch and curl like roots. And a thought arrives uninvited. Would they still point north if you lost the rest of you? You close your eyes and wait for the world to skip again.
Morning comes gray, reluctant, as if even the sun isn't sure it wants to see what's still standing. You leave the city behind without breakfast, traveling light and fast, like someone who knows they've overstayed their welcome. The road coils through hills and low woods now, dotted with the crumbling remnants of shrines so old they no longer have gods, just echoes and moss. You start walking with your compass always in hand. Not to find your way, necessarily, just to check which direction not to face. Around midday, a cart creaks into view ahead, painted red, pulled by an ox with a limp and a bell around its neck. The driver is a middle-aged man, broad-shouldered, weather-worn, with a straw hat low over his eyes and a scarf tied tight against the wind. He offers you a ride. You hesitate, then climb aboard. He speaks very little, but what he does say comes slow and oddly measured, like someone used to talking in front of altars. You ask if he's local. He shakes his head. No one's truly local to this road, he says. It just lets you walk on it. After some time, he gestures to the right, toward a stretch of forest that looks no different than the rest, until you notice it. The trees there lean slightly backward, as if pushed by something constant and invisible. That's the old funeral path, he says. Back in the day, they'd bring the bodies up from the south, but the heads always pointed north when they burned. You glance at him, eyebrows raised. Why? He shrugs. Return to origin. Breath leaves the body through the mouth. Wind carries it north. That's what the monks said, anyway. Is it true? He chuckles. You ever try catching your own breath after it's left? You ride in silence after that. When he drops you off near a river bend, you thank him. He just nods and hands you something wrapped in cloth, a worn amulet etched with directional kanji. It's not for protection, he warns. It's just a reminder.
That night, you stay in a roadside inn run by two brothers who speak in half-jokes and polite riddles. They show you to a room at the far end of the corridor, and before you even ask, one of them grins. "Facing west," he says, "we figured you'd prefer that." You don't ask how they knew. You just nod. But despite the comfort, the clean bedding, the warm bath, the hot sake, you can't sleep. Not fully. There's something in the walls here. Not a presence, a pressure. You lie still, eyes open, listening. At one point, the wind picks up and slaps a wooden shutter outside. Then the sound comes, soft, rhythmic, like someone walking on straw sandals down the hallway. Slow, unhurried. You hold your breath. The steps stop outside your door. Silence. Then, just under the bottom panel, you see it. A sliver of shadow. Not cast by lantern or moonlight, but somehow darker than either. As if the absence itself had decided to visit. You don't move. You don't blink. Eventually, the shadow retracts, the steps recede. But you don't sleep. Not because you're afraid, but because some part of you, the part closest to the back of your neck, wants to follow. You ride before dawn and ask the brothers about the hallway. One of them waves a hand. Old floorboards, always creaking. The other looks less convinced. "We had a monk stay once who said something strange," he murmurs. "Said north-facing rooms invite what hasn't finished dying yet." And what did he mean by that? The man looks at you, carefully. He meant not everything that's dead knows it yet. The logic makes a crooked kind of sense. In early Heian texts, there's mention of mayabore, death premonitions that manifest as dreams, weather changes, or even directional disturbances. The winds might shift, birds might stop chirping. The north becomes loud, not in sound, but in suggestion. Historians are still undecided whether these were superstitions or early psychiatric phenomena. One scroll even documents a nobleman who hired an attendant just to sleep facing north on his behalf, believing the bad luck would transfer. It didn't. Both died within the week. When you leave the inn, the older brother hands you a small folded paper charm. It's warm from his palm. "Keep it under your tongue if you dream standing up," he says. You want to laugh, but you don't. Because part of you has already imagined it, rising mid-sleep.
You spend the next few days in the valley, where time stretches like old lacquer, thin, glossy, and just slightly warped. The villages here are small, almost shy. Rice paddies shimmer with dragonflies. Elderly farmers wave without stopping their work. At night, the frogs chant lullabies that seem older than speech. And still, you sleep lightly, never fully. Even when nothing strange happens, the memory of North is a weight in your mind, like an itch beneath a bandage. You start to dream, not nightmares exactly, but directional dreams. You stand in rooms with no doors, spin slowly like a compass needle, always pausing, just before you face north. Always. Until one night, you don't stop in time. You turn, and wake up cold. Your blanket is gone, tossed aside. Your body lies diagonally across the mat, head tilted toward the exact cardinal point you've been avoiding for weeks. You reach into your pocket. The charm is missing. You don't panic. You get up calmly, open the shutters to let in the silver-gray morning. The mist still sits low on the ground, whispering secrets you don't want to know. You wash your face, get dressed, pack your things. The innkeeper, a kind-faced woman with more wrinkles than furniture, watches you wordlessly. You ask if there's a shrine nearby. She nods and gives you directions to one carved into the cliffside, an old earth shrine, barely maintained. "It's not for asking," she says, voice like parchment. "It's for remembering."
The trail leads uphill through cedar and stone. You pass fox statues crumbling into moss, offerings long since picked clean by birds or time. The path narrows, and eventually you find it, a squat, lichen-covered structure with no door. Just a stone platform and a wooden placard with illegible writing. But someone has swept the floor. Someone still comes here. You kneel on the straw mat inside and close your eyes. Not to pray, just to listen. And in that quiet, a thought unfolds. Maybe the reason you're so afraid to face north is because deep down, you know something is still waiting for you there. Maybe it always was. Japanese folklore is full of unfinished business, Yurei spirits tethered by regret or duty. The most restless ones are said to turn north in death, unable to move on until their stories are properly closed. Historians still argue whether this belief was metaphor or madness. Some say it served a logistical purpose, ritual placement for easier temple orientation. Others insist it was psychological. Humans crave pattern, and directional taboos provide structure in a chaotic world. But there's a third theory. Whispered in certain esoteric circles, rarely written down. It says that north, true north, spiritual north, is not just a compass point. It's a threshold, a crack in the sky. A direction you don't face because it's already facing you. And it waits. You stay at the shrine until dusk. No visions. No wind. Just the creak of trees and the soft, polite pressure of time urging you to leave. You don't sleep that night. Instead, you sit outside your room beneath the eaves, watching mist form and dissipate like memory. And around 3 a.m., you see someone. A figure on the far side of the rice field, standing still, too still, facing you, facing south. Your skin prickles, but your mind tries to reason. A traveler, maybe, or a farmer out checking traps. But you know better. Because when you blink, the figure is gone. And your pillow, once again, is turned to the north. You ask the innkeeper in the morning if she saw anyone. She shakes her head slowly. Then she hands you something. It's your lost charm, damp, as if recently recovered from soil. You don't ask how she got it. You just say thank you. That day you walk a new path, one not on your original route, a pilgrimage trail used by mountain ascetics called Yamabushi. They followed no fixed maps, only instinct and sky, believing enlightenment could be found by crossing the invisible lines that divide the living world from the dead. One of their core teachings? Avoid what pulls, especially if it pulls from the north. But what happens when what pulls is you?
By now, the journey is no longer about geography. You're walking through memory, through old fears and older questions. The trail rises sharply, winding through forests that feel like they've been holding their breath for centuries. You pass stone markers carved with strange sigils, draped in rotting straw Shimenawa ropes, wards meant to divide sacred from profane. You begin counting them. Not on purpose, just something your mind does to stay busy. But when you reach marker number 27, something odd happens. The rope is missing, and the sigils aren't worn, they're scratched out, as if something didn't want the boundary there anymore. You take a deep breath, keep walking. Eventually, you reach an abandoned watchpost, just a low roof of shingles and some broken lanterns. A good place to rest, or so you think. Until you notice the moss on the ground only grows on 3 sides. The 4th side, facing north, is bare. Not just of moss, but dust, debris, even insects. As if nothing dares settle there. You sit anyway, with your back firmly to the north. You try to eat a rice ball from your pack, but it crumbles in your hand. The filling is missing. You didn't take a bite. Historians have documented countless small superstitions like this. In 18th century Edo, samurai manuals included entire sections on omens. If your food falls apart, cancel your duel. If a bird calls thrice before dawn, change your route. And of course, if you dream of standing facing north, burn your bedding and fast for 3 days. No one does that now. But you're not in now. You're in something older, something watching. Night falls like it's closing a door. And that's when the snow begins. You didn't expect it. The weather was mild all day. But now, flakes drift from the trees, slow and deliberate, like ash that's forgotten how to burn. You shelter under the roof, watching it pile silently around you. And then you hear it. A voice, just a whisper, saying your name. Once. Then again, closer. You don't turn. You don't need to. The air behind you has changed. It's colder, yes, but also quieter. Like all sound is being swallowed. You recite the only prayer you remember, a half-mumbled Shingon chant your grandmother used to say over boiling water when someone was sick. It doesn't help. The voice doesn't go away. Instead, it begins humming, a low, tuneless lullaby. You shut your eyes, not because it helps, but because it gives you something to do besides scream. You fall asleep somehow. When you wake, it's still snowing, but now there are footprints, human, bare, leading from your shelter straight north. You didn't make them. You stand. Every part of you wants to follow, not out of curiosity, but out of recognition, as if part of you already walked that way once and forgot the return trip. Still, you resist. You whisper thank you to the trees, the snow, the silence. And then you walk south. For hours. Until you come across another traveler, a boy, maybe 14, carrying a carved staff and a fox mask hanging from his sash. He nods politely but doesn't stop walking. As he passes, he says, "You saw the pathless, didn't you?" You pause, ask what he means. He doesn't look back. If it hums, it's still looking. That night, you build a fire. Not for warmth, but reminder. The glow makes shadows behave, at least for a while. And in the flickering light, you remember an obscure entry from a Meiji-era folklore journal, the north-facing ones, a secret society of priests who would meditate standing in open fields, facing north, until they entered trance states. Some returned with visions of past lives, others never returned at all. Historians debate whether they were real or just a poetic metaphor for political dissidents vanishing under the regime. But the symptoms, the dreams, the humming, you're checking every box. You clutch the charm in your coat pocket, it's warm again. This time, you don't wonder why. You know something is trying to warn you or welcome you. You just don't know which. You make it to the city by week's end. A former castle town, now more temples than towers, its bones rebuilt a dozen times over by hands both calloused and careless. It's quiet here, in that peculiar way old cities get quiet, less absence of noise, more presence of stillness. You arrive just before dusk, which is a mistake. Dusk in cities like this has a texture, a thickness, like time folding gently inward. The lanterns go up as if to hold the dark at arm's length, but they don't succeed. Not really. You find lodging in a merchant's house turned into an inn. It's clean, modest, and built around a central garden where crickets chirp like ticking clocks. You ask the keeper casually about room orientation, and he chuckles as if that's a quaint superstition. "We stopped worrying about that when railways came through," he says. Still, when he shows you to your room, you catch your breath. The pillow is on the northern wall. You don't say anything. You just stand there for a while, feeling the slow itch of unease behind your eyes. Eventually, you thank him, wait for him to leave, then methodically rotate the bedding 90 degrees. Better not to risk it. But that night, the city has other plans. You wake at 2:13 a.m., not because of a sound, but because of a pause, like the world skipped a frame and your brain noticed. You sit up. The moon is sharp as glass through the paper window,
And for just a moment, you see something impossible. Your pillow, it's back against the northern wall. You stare. You don't remember moving it. You don't think you moved it. And yet, there it is. A scholar once wrote that the most unsettling kind of horror isn't blood or violence. It's when reality casually ignores its own rules. That, he said, is when the mind begins to drift from the dock of certainty. You lie back down, this time with your head pointed west. You don't sleep. You pretend to sleep. There's a difference. Pretending is for protection. Sleep is for surrender. At dawn, you ask around, quietly, carefully. You learn that this part of town was once a burial quarter, back when cities sorted the dead by direction. Cremation wasn't always the standard. Bodies were interred beneath stone towers that no longer stand. And the only rule, strict and unwavering, was that the dead always face north. That way, they wouldn't wander. But as you press further, you start to hear another word crop up. Kubikajiri. It rings a bell, but not one you want to answer. An old folk tale rooted somewhere between warning and myth. A spirit that prowls graveyards at night, eating the heads of corpses. It always faces north when it feeds, they say, because that's where the veil is thinnest. That's where the smell comes from. You want to laugh it off, but there's an uncomfortable footnote. Kubikajiri is said to search not only for corpses, but also for its own lost head. And how does it find it? By sniffing out the direction of death, by turning north. You find an old woman who runs a shop selling lacquered combs and hairpins. She says her grandmother used to mutter in her sleep about the north wind eater. You ask what that meant. She says she doesn't know. But then she frowns. There's an old thing we were taught, she murmurs, almost to herself. If you ever smell something rotten and sweet at the same time, lie flat on your back, do not move, do not open your eyes, and above all, do not turn your head north. Why? Because if you turn toward it, she says, you're saying yes. To what? She won't answer. Historians often categorize tales like Kubikajiri as cautionary devices, myths meant to keep children from playing near tombs or wandering at night. But there are gaps. Reports from as late as the Meiji era mention people found near gravesites, heads twisted in unnatural positions, their own hands clasped tightly over their ears. The official cause? Night terrors. Unofficially, one too many said yes. That evening, you refuse the same room. They give you another, northeast-facing, smaller, mustier. You don't sleep anyway. At some point, you find yourself staring at your own hands, palms up, watching how the veins branch and curl like roots. And a thought arrives uninvited. Would they still point north if you lost the rest of you? You close your eyes and wait for the world to skip again.
Dawn breaks slow and confused. The grass doesn't glisten like it should. No dew, no birdsong. Just a pale light that slips across the plain of echoes like it doesn't want to be here either. You pack your things in silence. The banner's still there. So are your footprints, disturbingly crisp. You test the plane's legend. Whisper a word, just a nonsense syllable. 3 minutes later, it returns, but lower, slower, from the north. You walk anyway. There's no other route. The grass swishes underfoot, unnaturally even. No dips, no rocks. It's as if the land was ironed flat by an old god with control issues. Halfway through, you spot something metallic buried in the soil. You crouch. It's a coin. Strangely cold, even under the sun. You wipe it clean. Not yen, not any modern currency, but familiar. The chrysanthemum crest of the imperial family, yes, but older, cruder, like an early Meiji mint or a commemorative token lost by time and memory. Then you hear it again. Footsteps. Not echoing yours, these are independent, close, soft, purposeful. You don't turn around, because you know already what direction they come from, the north. You remember a fragment of a 19th century journal by a Dutch translator stationed in Edo. He'd heard tales from local servants of the Northbound Pilgrims, a band of Ronin who vanished on a spiritual quest after the fall of their clan. Supposedly, they walked into the northern wilds seeking the Gate of Still Wind. Only one came back, mute, blind in one eye, and always facing south, even in sleep. Historians dismiss it as a ghost story tangled in post-Bakumatsu grief, but the metaphor lingers. Even in you. You reach the far end of the plain and finally dare to look back. No banner, no footsteps, just the coin in your hand. You pocket it, but it burns through fabric like guilt. The next village is behind a torii gate half swallowed by ivy. The air smells of wet iron and old ink. Children play without laughing. Chickens don't cluck. And every door has a small string of bells tied above the lintel. You hear one chime. Just one. You stop at a tea house. The server doesn't speak, just places a cup before you and gestures to the seat with a bow. The tea is warm and herbal, and you feel your chest unclench for the first time in days. But on the table, under your cup, is a folded note. Ink brush, slanted script, no signature. It reads, "If your shadow points north, do not sleep." You get up, you keep walking. Because your shadow does point north, and the sun is directly overhead. You reach the edge of the village by twilight and see a path worn thin by many feet, but only one direction. You follow it. The forest here is different. Thinner, yes, but restless. Every breeze sounds like someone trying to speak just under their breath. You reach a fork, and without thinking, turn left. And then stop. You don't remember choosing left. You turn around. The path behind you is gone, only undergrowth, untouched. Your chest tightens. Your charm, gone. Again. This time, you don't bother looking. Because now you understand. You're not being led by something. You're being led back. To a place you've never been, but somehow left. You press forward, because now there's no other way. And in the dying light, just visible through the brush, you see another stone marker. Number 27 again. With a rope. Frayed. But this time, it's tied in a loop. You stare at the rope. It sways gently in the breeze, though the trees around you are still. The loop isn't quite a noose, but your body reacts like it is. Your hands go cold, your breath shortens. Somewhere, deep in your bones, something ancient is whispering, "Don't step through." You listen to it, for now. Instead, you walk around the marker, careful not to disturb anything. You count your steps, 7 clockwise, 7 counterclockwise, an old habit from temple rituals, learned in childhood and forgotten until just now. You didn't know you remembered that, but your feet did. Beyond the marker, the path shifts. It's darker now, not just because of twilight, but because the trees are denser, leaning close like nosy monks. The ground is soft and uneven. Your boots leave deep impressions, but you no longer check if they stay behind. You already know the answer. Eventually, the forest breaks, and you find yourself standing before an old estate, crumbling, grand, and unmistakably samurai. Its entrance gate is wide open, not welcoming, just open. 2 faded banners hang from crooked poles, both bearing a mon, 3 waves beneath a crescent moon. You don't recognize the symbol, but your stomach does. It clenches, like it's just remembered a debt unpaid. Inside, the courtyard is overgrown with weeds and silence. Lanterns still hang from eaves, long extinguished but surprisingly intact. One flickers faintly. You approach. The flame inside it is not fire. It's a floating ember, hovering in place. When you lean in, it vanishes, but only after you catch a whisper. Not a word. A direction. Again. North.
You don't ask questions anymore. Curiosity has been replaced by protocol. Your body moves like it's reading an old manual of survival. You slide open the door. It doesn't creak. It sighs. Inside is dust, layers thick, but undisturbed. Not a single footprint, not even yours. You pass rooms filled with relics, an armor stand, empty but polished, scrolls with ink so fresh it hasn't finished bleeding into the paper, a shamisen with a snapped string, the other two tuned perfectly. And then you find it. A sleeping mat, perfectly aligned with the room's northern wall. No pillow, no personal items, just the mat. You don't lie down, but your legs do want to. Instead, you kneel, stare northward, and for a moment you remember something, not a fact, but a feeling. That centuries ago, samurai believed the soul could escape the body in sleep, and that the north, home to Yama, Lord of the Dead, was a gate. If you slept facing north, your soul might wander and forget the way back. Historians still argue whether this was metaphor or metaphysics, but samurai manuals instructed warriors to never sleep with heads north unless they wished for symbolic death. You rise. A part of you doesn't want to. A part of you feels seen by this place, claimed, like a favorite knife pulled from a drawer after years of dust. You pass a mirror on the way out. It shows you facing north, though you're turning away. You don't stop walking. Back outside, night has fully arrived. And with it, sound. But not from the trees. From beneath you. Drums. Low. Deep. Like echoes from a war still being fought under the soil. You remember that forgotten battle, the one they didn't teach in schools. A civil skirmish between warlords over spiritual geography. Not resources. Not politics. Alignment. One general had forbidden his men from facing north at camp. The other forced his to stare into the direction all night before battle. Neither side survived. But one became legend. The northbound host. Supposedly, they never broke formation, even as they died. Still standing, still facing north. Some claim their bodies turned to stone. Others say they're still waiting. You walk faster. The path narrows. Trees crowd you. Whispers hover just beyond hearing. Then, suddenly, a clearing. And at the center, a lone figure kneeling before a fire. You can't see their face, but their back is straight, their armor gleams faintly. Their hair is tied high, like a retainer ready to receive orders. You don't speak. You just wait. The figure stirs and whispers, "You came back late."
The figure before the fire doesn't turn. He just stays kneeling, a statue with breath, spine sharp as a drawn blade. The fire crackles, though there's no wood beneath it, just embers suspended on nothing. The color isn't orange. It's a dull, wet red, like lacquered blood under moonlight. "You came back late," he says again. His voice isn't angry. It's disappointed, as if he expected you hours or centuries ago. You don't answer. You're not sure you're supposed to. Instead, you step into the clearing fully, half expecting the earth to swallow you up. But it doesn't. The air here is warm. Not comforting, just resolved. As though the clearing knows what it is and is tired of pretending otherwise. The man rises slowly. Not like a ghost, like a soldier with too many years in the same kneel. He turns. You see his face. It's yours. Almost. Not quite. The nose is too straight, the eyes a touch narrower, but the resemblance is unmistakable, like looking at your reflection in a blade, distorted by edge and purpose. He studies you with a kind of tired recognition. Then, with no fanfare, he speaks. You left facing west. You returned facing north. That is the whole wound. You try to respond, but your mouth feels wrong, like your jaw's been borrowed. He gestures toward the ground. You glance down. 2 footprints, deep, right where you're standing. Not yours, but they fit. Perfectly. He nods. So, you remember.
and something cracks behind your eyes. Not a memory, not a vision, a shape. The silhouette of a forgotten obligation, like a vow muttered half asleep that still holds legal weight in the realm of dreams. You were here before, not as a visitor, as a deserter. And that's why North stings. That's why you never sleep facing it, because to face North is to confess. The man sits again, this time cross-legged. You notice he's wearing two swords, daisho, but they're reversed, short blade on the left, long blade on the right, a sign of dishonor or mourning. Historians still debate whether it was ever a real practice or just symbolic storytelling passed down to romanticize betrayal. Either way, this figure has made his choice. You can't fix the breach, he says, but you can witness it. That's enough. He offers a scroll. You don't take it. You know what it says. You don't know how, but you do. It's your confession, your departure, your real one, not from a place, but from a code. You had once turned your back on duty, not in a glorious, dramatic act, but in the quiet moment between breaths. Just didn't return to camp. And that night, your comrades slept facing north, waiting, only waiting. None survived, at least not in the way that counts. The man gestures again, and the fire dims. You're not cursed, he says. You're just unfinished. That hits harder than any accusation. You kneel, not because you want to, but because your knees fold of their own accord. The man places a blade before you, wakizashi length, sheathed, light. You don't touch it, but you understand. You won't use it. You'll carry it. Because that's your burden. To walk, not seeking redemption, but remembering the lack of it. The man stands, steps backward into the dark, and fades. No sound, no rustle, just gone, like a scene wiped from a painted scroll. You're alone again. But the fire remains, dull, red, calm. You sit beside it, the scroll and the blade before you. Above, clouds drift across a moon that isn't full, but doesn't need to be. You finally exhale, and for the first time in this entire journey, the wind sighs with you. It moves south, behind you, no longer pushing, just watching. Like it knows you finally remembered which direction you came from, and which direction not to sleep in.
The fire dies slowly. It doesn't sputter out or flicker away. It just fades, ember by ember, like a memory losing confidence in its own details. The blade and the scroll remain on the ground beside you. They don't glow, they don't hum, they just exist, quietly. You stand. Pick up the scroll. It's lighter than you expected, and warm, not from the fire, from familiarity. You don't open it. Some things aren't meant to be reread. The blade you tuck behind your sash, reversed like the man before you. For mourning, for memory, not for use. You turn slowly, and the clearing has changed again. The forest edges have softened, like painted backgrounds in a stage play just before the curtain drops. You're not entirely sure which way is north anymore. That's fine. The burden isn't to face it, only to remember why you shouldn't. You walk out of the clearing and into a path that wasn't there before. The trees part gently, like they've been expecting this moment. You're not scared now, just thoughtful, like someone carrying an object too fragile for pockets. After a while, you reach a footbridge. It's old, sagging, bound in rope so frayed you could sneeze and snap it. You cross anyway. And halfway over, you stop. The moon reflects in the stream below.
It's not a full reflection. Your own face doesn't appear, but the banner from the mountain does. Faint, as if printed on water, as if the stream remembers what the land has tried to forget. You bow, just once, out of habit or guilt, or maybe something quieter. Then cross. The other side is warmer, slightly, like the world has turned a degree toward dawn, even if it's still night. You pass an abandoned way station, a roadside shrine with no offerings, and a group of moss-covered stones too smooth to be natural. But no eyes follow you anymore, not even the ones you imagined. The village comes into view just as the first bird stirs, quietly, uncertainly. You smile, because birds haven't sung for days. Or maybe they have, and you simply didn't have ears tuned to notice them. You step into the village as a figure appears on the road, elderly, bent, carrying a bundle of firewood on their back and a bell at their waist. The bell rings softly. You brace for something, echoes, footsteps, cold whispers, but nothing comes. Only the warmth of that soft metallic chime. The elder nods to you. You nod back. A question lingers in your throat, but it doesn't rise. What's left to ask? You've already walked the answer, carried it, faced it. Or, at least, not faced it. In the tea house, the same woman is there. Same seat, same cup. She doesn't speak. But the tea is different this time. Sweet, floral, like chrysanthemum. Your shadow now points west. And the moment you notice it, it shifts, just slightly. No longer bound to direction, only to you. When you stand again, it follows easily. You walk south, away from the mountains, away from the looped rope, the mirrored face, the unspoken scroll. But you carry them still. The blade, the memory, the choice. Because now you understand the real reason samurai never slept facing north. It wasn't about ghosts. It was about debt. Unpaid, unspoken, sometimes not even your own. To sleep facing north is to tempt memory into motion, to lie in the direction of endings. And you're still writing yours. So now, as the footsteps fade and the trees soften back into their nighttime hush, let your breath settle. You've carried enough weight for one evening. No more wandering, no more strange banners or vanished paths. Just this moment. The whisper of air across your skin. The soft curve of your own heartbeat, slow and steady now, like a drum remembered rather than struck. You can rest. You've walked a long way through stories that feel half true, half